Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, continuing on with our Supercoach team and Supercoach discussions. If I can spit that out, we do have the Gold Coast Suns today with a special guest, Supercoach Ant, big Gold Coast supporters since their inception. Welcome, mate.
Thanks for having me, Swizz. Good to get on the podcast and chat my beloved Suns.
I love it, mate. Now, you are from the West. How did you actually become a Suns supporter there?
It's an interesting story. I went to the theme parks on a family holiday and just loved them so much, and got back home when I was 10 years old and decided to go for the Gold Coast Suns because also from the West, David Swallow's going there. So mix of the two, and then, yeah, here I am.
I love that, mate. It would have been interesting growing up at school. It's a pretty parochial town with West Coast and Fremantle, especially with the West Coast Eagles. So you probably did stand out there a little bit.
Yeah, copped it a lot from my mates, and yeah, still copping it. So hopefully we're gonna have a good year this year and shut a few of them up.
Yeah, mate. Well, you're definitely in a better position right now of being a Sun supporter than a West Coast Eagles supporter. So hopefully the good times roll.
Yeah, hopefully looking good.
All right, we'll look at those fixtures starting off. Like a few of the teams, or 8 of them, very annoying. The Gold Coast Suns do have that early round 0 match, meaning they've got an early bye in round 2. The good thing, though, is they don't have any price rises until after their bye. So if you aren't starting any Suns players, you get a easy look at them for the round 0 game, which doesn't count in our Supercoach scores, but does count to their price rises. And then they get the West Coast Eagles, which, though it's always hard traveling there, you'd expect the Suns to do a job if they're going to be serious about September or fighting for September this year. We get to have a look at 2 games there before their bye, and then potentially able to do a correction trade to get 1 or 2 Suns players in. And then they play the D's, the Crows, and North Melbourne in that little period, which is very good. But even the bit that doesn't show is they actually then have the Tigers at Dimmer's favourite ground, Marvel. So for a 4-week period, it's probably, in some people's minds, could be the bottom 4 or 4 of the bottom 5 this year in a row. So it's a fantastic start for the Suns. What are your thoughts there, mate?
Yeah, we usually start the season pretty strongly as well and then tail off. So I think the fact that we do have pretty good fixtures to start off with and our start of season form's pretty strong, you should be looking to take away probably 4 to 5 of those 6 games at least if we are going to try and push the 8 this year. So yeah, I think probably an emphasis as well on those away games, I think will be a thing this year after our away form the last sort of couple of years. So start off strong with West Coast to Optus and then build from there. So, yeah.
And even those doubles, they look pretty friendly. Like the Tigers, anybody who's going to double against the Tigers, which, what's it, the 6 teams, you're probably ahead on the ledger there. But because not only have you banked the extra win, but probably a percentage booster, because I think we're going to be absolutely rubbish this season. Melbourne could be anything. But already, Gawn's got his struggles, Track's got his struggles, and we don't know how Clary's going to come back. And if their 3 key players have got issues, Stephen May, it hasn't come out officially how much hot water he got down Sorrento with Prestia, but even they have some fitness concerns with May and Lever in the past. So it doesn't take too many key pillars to send the D's down, unfortunately, for their supporters. The Giants, does the heartbreak of last year hurt them? The Bombers could be anything, but they have invested in youth. And even the Crows, there's question marks about them. Talking to MJ, he's optimistic about them improving, but at the same time, there is a world where he could see Matthew Nicks sacked by halfway through the year. So it's a pretty friendly double fixture. The only thing they're probably not missing is maybe a North Melbourne or West Coast in there as well. But it could be a lot worse compared to other teams.
Yeah, I think obviously the Brisbane one's the tough one, and then GWS as well. But I feel like the rest of them pretty favourable, those other 4. So yeah, we can at least go 2s in probably 3 of them. Then yeah, try and push the 8 with that.
And that's got to be the goal. What is that your expectations this year to
definitely
make the 8? Yeah.
I think second year with Dimmer, young list, like our midfielders are all sort of Rao, Anderson, Flanders, all that sort of same draft class. They're 24 this year. So everyone's sort of starting to push that bit more mature now and sort of starting to piece it together. So I think just some fine tuning and then, hopefully pushing the 8.
Yeah, and I really hope so too. It's you always say you're not meant to have a second team, but it'd probably be Tassie when it comes in. But for now, it's the Suns. I do have in my other video, you would have seen the Gary Ablett Jr. Um, jumper behind me, which is signed by the great man. So I do have a soft spot, and has been a bit of a cross breeding ground for the Tigers. It's obviously Lynch, Prestia, Caddy have all come from there, and then you guys have obviously had Brandon and now Daniel Rioli join it. So it's hard for me not to have a soft spot for the Suns. And that lineup, it does seem ready to at least try to compete for the finals, if not make it. And with those a couple of in, so Mac Andrew, we saw him burst on the scene last year. Sam Collins is, like, everybody talks about underrated players. He might be the most underrated player in the league as a one-on-one fullback, and for what they picked him up from, it's just amazing. Ulan came in last year and really showed his awares, had a couple of big scores. Daniel and Rioli and John Noble, the pickups off half back, which will probably free up Flanders further up the ground. Charlie Ballard's a star at centre half back. I've got Powell, Miller, and Closley, who another one put his hand up with some big games last year, would have featured in a lot of our Supercoach sides. I've pushed Flanders up to the half forward line, but he could really slot in anywhere. Can still play half back, can play midfield. I'd expect with the additions of Rioli and Noble that he will spend more time around the guts. Then Walter, there's the centre half forward. Long, King, Ainsworth in the forward line, and then Witts, Rowell, Anderson, the engine room for the Suns, with Graham Lombard, the new highly touted recruit, Rogers and Reed, who were the high picks from last year, and then I've put Lockie Well as the sub. What are your thoughts about that 23, mate? And I know there's a little bit of depth there with a couple of guys who had opportunities that will probably get a chance throughout the year. But yeah, what are you thinking there?
Yeah, that's pretty much that's the same 23 I'd have. It's just probably comes down to the mix, sort of not really knowing how we're going to set up. Obviously, yeah, with the acquisitions of Rioli and Noble, you do feel that Flanders will move up the ground, and in my opinion, he should be a full-time midfielder. I think he's our most consistent midfielder as well when he goes in there. But I think his versatility is sort of his detriment a bit as well, so he gets thrown around a bit. I think we could see Tuke Miller maybe pushing more to a half forward this year, as we sort of do see that emergence more of Flanders, Rowell, and Anderson sort of they're becoming the main men. And then, I think Tuke can be that sort of pressure high forward who's the almost fourth banana there. And then also in the midfield mix, I would like to see Bailey Humphrey probably get a bit more of a go this year. I think he's a bit down on form and confidence last year. But I think he's the sort of high upside player, can be that sort of damaging goal kicking rest forward mid. So I think we've fixed up our areas that we were sort of probably weaker in last year, which is that halfback rebound. It's tough when you sort of got to play people like Rory Atkins and Alex Sexton might not be the best thing. But I think sort of getting in Dan Rioli is coming off a BNF season, and then John Noble is sort of played pretty much every game for a good Collingwood side for the last 3 years by the grand final. Looking a lot better, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think that's the key for the Suns. Like, it's always hard if you do get injuries, but at least from a starting point of view, your Nick Holmans, your David Swallows now, Thomas Berry's, Alex Sexton's, Braden Fiorini's, who have played quite a bit of footy for the Suns over a number of years, are all pushed as sort of backup players in that very strong Suns VFL side, who are already pretty successful. But if those guys are playing majority of the time down the seconds, and even like Elliot Himmelberg, who you've brought in, and they're only kind of used as players that have got to come in to fill a 1 or 2 week injury or suspension, I think it puts you guys in a much better stead than you have been previously.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think, a lot of those guys probably are the guys you want as depth players and not sort of those best 22. But I think sort of the more emergence of those younger guys, hopefully they can sort of cement their spots and then, keep those older guys out. But it's good to sort of have them as a backup option.
Yeah, for sure. And that moves us on to our Supercoach targets. That's why we're all here. The big one last year, and I didn't start him, but again, with that early buy, I was very quickly to get him in. He was brilliant for us, Sam Flanders. Comes in this year at 641, averaged 119, which was just off the charts. I think he might have even won the ton run last year. It wasn't until round 21 against the Eagles where he had 91. That was his lowest score for the year. So the consistency was just amazing, and the fact that he could still have the ceiling where, like against Richmond, he got 161. I think some people are very divided on starting him this year just because A, the price, and B, the role that he should be pushed off the half back line. And is it starting off the half forward, or as you said, is it Touk starting off and he should be in the guts? Where do you stand on someone like Sam Flanders, mate?
He's personally the first pick person in my team, I think. Sort of did a bit of numbers on him and sort of played those three sort of different roles last year. He played that half back role, played it for 10 games, averaged 120. Games as a full-time mid, which I just classified as above 60% CBAs. He went 114, which is actually his lowest out of the three. And then he played 6 games as a half forward / CBA player, less than 60% CBAs. And he actually averaged 121 in that over the 6 games, which is pretty interesting. So shows that he can probably score in all those roles. His floor is so high, as you saw. Didn't go below 100 until round 21 and had 2 sub-tons for the whole year. So I think the fact that we're getting him as a def, just lock him in, leave him, he'll be a D1.
Yeah, I do like that. I'm toying with the idea of him. It is the starting fixture. At least we do get that round 0 to look at. I can live with having Suns or a Giants players we did last year missing on that round 2 bye and just cover it kind of with a rookie. I don't think it puts you that far apart because you're going to have, like round 3, you're going to have Lions and Swans missing anyway. So, there's nothing wrong with having 1 or 2 players missing. And it's amazing how many people are happy to pick those players from that round 4 bye that round 3 bye where there's so many good players, but everyone's trying to avoid the round 2 bye and say, oh no, I can't have them because they're on an early bye. Well, there's nothing wrong with having 1 or 2 missing, and that fixture, like, as we said, West Coast, who, they've added some good players into that 22 this year with Baker and Graham coming in, but I still, you expect them to struggle. So there's a big chance, say, a Flanders type could be a good captain option as a backup of your VC Fells. And then, as we've said, Melbourne, Adelaide, North Melbourne, Richmond, you could not get an easier start from a Supercoach point of view. And, and he's one who, it doesn't matter what role, as you said, he can go 120 easy.
Yeah, for sure. I think, just the way he accumulates just lifts that floor so high. And the fact that we've seen him round 24 last year, had 11% CBAs, played half forward and got 161. So just shows that scoring power is there and not necessarily role dependent, which is pretty handy as well. So feel like if Dimmer does sort of use him as that Swiss Army knife type of guy, you still have confidence that he can score in any role.
Yeah, for sure. The next one is one of the additions to the lineup from Richmond, Daniel Rioli, 500K. I've heard a few people talking about him from a Supercoach point of view. I think he's probably more of a draft relevancy because we know Dimmer loves him, loves having him the ball in his hand from half back, and will give the Suns a bit more creative license from there. But maybe from a starting point of view in our classic teams, not so much. What are you expecting to see from Daniel?
He's an interesting one Supercoach wise because he hasn't really ever sort of broken into those top tier, top 6, top 8 sort of defensive primo numbers. So obviously had a career best year last year and still only went at the 93. So you see him in the half back line. I feel like there's going to be a bit of a share of distribution. You'll have your Rioli down there. You'll have Noble. Will Power could play wing, could play half back. He'll also take kickouts as well. So I think there is a lot of sharing back there, and he probably won't have a monopoly on all the distribution. So I think it may be hard for him to sort of go that 100 plus. You need a 8 point improvement on his career best year just to be a sort of in the mix. I don't really know if, I don't sort of see him as that top end defensive primo.
Yeah, and I think that's fair too. That was my worry with probably actually surprised. And I think it's probably is Richmond supporters who are still more in love with him, or just that natural player swapping clubs, going to a team who's probably is a little bit more fantasy friendly than his previous club. But I don't think he's got, like, he'll be in the mix, and would not surprise me if he's knocking on that door of that top 10. But at the same time, I don't think he's up there with that very uber elite when we're talking, Flanders, Sinclair, Sheasel, Even like, Max Holmes with the right role. There's some defenders there who, can easily go 110 plus. And I think his best season would be 105 if he could get there. And even then, I don't think he gets that close.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm more than happy to sort of pay up that extra 100K to get those top liners. Then I'm comfortable that they can go that 110. Whereas instead of the sort of Rioli, you're sort of trying to project that a bit more rather than actually seeing the numbers there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll move to the guts now, and this is where the Suns really come into their own. Obviously, Tuke's a little bit more underpriced than what he's been, but the main two in the engine rooms, Anderson and Rowell. Anderson coming in a bit more expensive at $574, Rowell at $550. Matty Rowell last year looked like he was going to tear the competition, a new one. Started the year absolutely on fire, had the 137 in the zero match, then went 155, 99, 129, 135, 126, 136. 7-round average of 131. There was still a couple of good games leading to the bye, and then pretty well completely fell off a cliff until the last few rounds. We talk about fast starts. If he's going to fast start again, he's nearly a lock in the team. But the question is, are we going to get Matt Rowell from the start of the season or Matt Rowell for the rest of the year?
That's the thing. I think you look at 2023 as well. We did the same thing. Started hot, went 107 pre-buy, and then 97 post-buy. This year was 114 pre-buy, 87 post-buy. So I think you can sort of look at it two ways. Like, one, yes, he is a young mid. He's still developing. But second, can that game style sort of be sustained for a whole season? He does get beat up a lot. He sort of was shifted out of the CBAs a bit more in the second half of the year. Was that because he was a bit sore? Probably goes hand in hand. Sort of went 81% CBAs before the buy, 71% after. So was sitting out in patches, having sort of 50% CBA games and only scoring 60, 70. So he doesn't really have that forward craft if he is not in the CBAs. So you're relying on him to be in that guts. And yeah, I don't know if that sort of game style that he has been playing at for the last 2 years is sustainable for a full year of just grit and grind, where he's always looking for the contact. He's that contested bull. So yeah, he's an interesting one with that, if he can try and sort of maintain that average from the start of the year.
Sorry, mate, and I've talked about some players about even their points per minutes and minutes on ground. And earlier in the year, you've got him still not like as high as some other players, but he's still playing at least between sort of 96 and 109 minutes on ground. And no surprising, in a couple of those really poor games, he's like 85 minutes of. So you're talking nearly like 75% game time. It dropped to in a couple of games. So, and then when he sort of scored back later in the year, the 110 against the D's, the 122 against the Eagles, it was back around that sort of 106 minutes. So you're talking about that extra 10, 15% time on ground. So yeah, maybe it was his body, and just, or maybe it was just, they were looking at other players at different stages, and Dimmer was just trying to get his, his stamp on the side. But yeah, I think he probably needs another trick if he's going to kind of be a season keeper for us, or he's just got to develop his fitness. And yeah, he probably is still getting beaten up a little bit, but if they can give a bit more support. Also, it probably didn't help because, Tuke being in and out of the side, so a little bit of missing consistency there. But with Bailey Humphries and Flanders continuing to develop, that might help his output there. We know he's going to be first to the ball, and he's an absolute tackle machine. So yeah, if he's starting fit and firing, it's going to be really hard to ignore up against some of those midfielders in the early rounds.
Yeah, for sure. I've started him the last 2 years, and I've had him for his good patches and I've had him for his bad patches. So I'm hoping that maybe if I do pick him, I can get a full year of goodness from him.
Yeah, and I think even if you do pick him and you see the drop off, especially in that drop off on time on ground, if it's that extra 10%, you've got to be prepared to use the trade to get off him at the right time. And those who did and side swapped him quickly last year, you're fine, because you not only got probably 130 average, or even if you hold a couple of weeks, you still probably got 125 out of him, and then you got whatever the player you jumped onto. But for those obviously that did hold and hoping he was turning it around, it was just frustrating. So yeah, there needs to be a word of warning there that Rowley at some point can drop off, but yeah, the fast starts 2 years in a row. We've got some data around that, and wouldn't be surprised if it's 3 years in a row.
Yep, for sure, definitely.
And he's good mate in there, Noah Anderson. A little bit more consistent, especially in the second half of the year. Does have the habit of dropping the odd 50. So there are potential to possibility of getting him cheaper, especially if he drops one early. The problem is a lot of the time when he drops a 50, he goes 150 the following week. So that can be frustrating because you look at the break even and go, great, I'm going to get Noah Anderson in 2 weeks' time, and 2 weeks' time he's actually gone up in value because he just seems to spike a score. So yeah, he's an interesting one. There seems to be no rhyme or reason why, from a stats point of view, why he gets some games he just goes poor outside of maybe copying attention. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Noah?
Yeah, Noah's an interesting one. He's probably out of the sort of Anderson, Rao, and Took, he's probably the one that actually interests me the most, purely because just of his up and down scoring is a lot based on winning, and that's sort of gone hand in hand with us playing at home. So home games last year, 11 games, 127 average, away games, 87 average, 129 average in wins, 86 average in losses. So if you sort of see Gold Coast maybe projecting up a bit, then more of those wins, less of those losses, you're getting more of those 130s, less of those bottom scores, goes more towards sort of that top 8 sort of level because he's sort of just on the brink a bit now. So you probably would need Gold Coast to sort of just go 2 or 3 wins more based off what he's putting out last year, and then you've got yourself a sort of top 8 average there. So yeah, I think he's an interesting one, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I really like that whole wins and losses and the home games. But yeah, I was looking at from a time on ground or even a yeah, that sort of situation. And yeah, it didn't seem like there was anything out of the ordinary. And it's just amazing that yeah, he's probably the one player in the league that seems to suffer from homesickness more than anything, even though he's from Victoria. So it's yeah, it's just a bizarre one there. But you are right. If they are going to win some extra games, and more importantly, those games early in the season, not to keep harping on it, and as much as it's not too many up on the Gold Coast, but there's they are against sort of the weaker opposition, and that might be a good thing because if he beats up on the bad teams and he's got them in the first 6, and then he starts getting some home games and where he likes to play, you could be onto something with Noah Anderson in your sides this season.
Yeah, for sure. I think just how influential he is on our game, I feel like he is sort of the barometer for us in that midfield. So when Noah's on, we're winning. So yeah, it goes hand in hand. I think you look at the flaw with him, though, that does come a lot to that sort of attention he might get with being the barometer. So I'd sort of recognise him. If we can clamp Anderson, might be able to clamp the Sun. So yeah, it is interesting. I think it's something he will need to develop as he sort of progresses as a mid. He's still pretty young, but yeah, getting 24, he's going to start having to learn with that attention a bit more. So he goes 3 lowest scores last year: 50 against Sydney, tagged by Jordan; 55 against Carlton, tagged by Hewitt; 59 against GWS, tagged by Bedford. So if he can sort of learn to try and deal with that attention a bit more, maybe Toot comes in and helps him a bit more as well. But if you can sort of make those 4 games instead of 50s up to 80s, makes him a way more intriguing prospect.
Yeah, one we haven't mentioned there is the trio, which is Tuke Miller, slightly more expensive than Matty Rowell. Only just did play only the 17 games last season, but we'll say 15 proper games because he did have a sub-affected game against North Melbourne with a 33. Also against St Kilda, he's and must have been, I believe, carrying a bit of an injury that day because his minutes were down on that one as well with a 58. So with those scores impacting his overall average, he only averaged 102 last year, which we know is a bit down for Tuke Miller's what he can provide. Even though again 2023 wasn't a great year, but back in 2022, this was one of the main men, averaged 120, 124 the year before. Still is only 28 years old, so he's not even that old from a footy perspective. So if the Suns are winning and he's in that midfield leading from example, he can still easily return back to his, maybe not to the 124s, but definitely as a guy who could be pushing that 110.
Yeah, for sure. I think we probably won't ever see the Toke that went 120 and 20 went on and 22 because the other options have stepped up a bit and progressed. So he doesn't have to be that man that sort of has to do everything, get from contest to contest. Like that year, he was sort of just an athletic freak and his fitness just looked insane. Whereas, this year, I think it'll be an interesting year. He's sort of struggled with injuries a bit the last 2 years as well. So I think if you can have a good preseason, sort of, he can definitely get back to that 110 sort of average, and it isn't that much of an increase from where he already is at the moment. He hasn't been playing his best footy, so it's a slight increase. I think he can get to that 110 sort of area. It's just we did sort of see his CBA's tail off a bit towards the back end of last year. So was that because he might not have had the most fitness because of injuries? Was that because Dim is sort of trying to experiment new things? It's an interesting one. Can probably see in the preseason and then round zero as well, just see how the mix is looking with Flanders, Rao, Anderson, Took, who else is in there. So, probably have a look and then assess from there.
Yeah, for sure. If it is come from round zero, like I'm with you, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Flanders is starting in the guts. Potentially Anderson could even come off from the wing side of things if they wanted to do it that way, if they wanted Took in for that first bounce. But in particular from a draft league, a redraft, I think Took's going to be a bit further down on the midfielders list just because there's more sexier names. And it's just some guy that you could probably pick up, where people are probably picking him up at his average of 102. Even if you jump slightly early, there is potential there to actually get somebody who's going to be mixing it with the better midfielders. And I think you can a little bit of sneaky value there for your actual draft when it comes to premium midfielders. So something to think about. All right, the rookie Leonardo Lombard, highly touted, 167K, which is not a bad price for somebody who's got the skill set that he does. Where do you see him fitting in this year, mate?
It's probably not going to be good for our Supercoach sides, but I think we see him as that sort of pressure forward. Played quite a bit of VFL footy last year and played that sort of high forward role. And we've seen this sort of caliber he is. He's won the Lark medal as the best player at the under-18s comp. So he has that pedigree as that inside mid. It's just I'm not sure he's going to get that time immediately off the bat. More of a half forward energy type player, I think. Average 60 fantasy over 8 VFL games last year as a half forward. So should get DPP, which could be handy. Probably a watch in pre-season, see the role, how deep he's playing in the forward line, how high he's getting up. If he's playing high and getting around it and he'll tackle, that he's a high energy player. So, if we can see him playing that high half forward, I think he could be a good pick.
Yeah, he's one that sort of divided me when every time I play with my team, I can find a spot for him, and there's other times where I'm like, I need to squeeze out a midfielder, and it's Lombard that's the one that goes out, and that again, like early buy and also roll, just has me worried because we know more under Stewie Jew, but even there wasn't a huge shift last year where the main midfielders spend a lot of time in there, higher percentage than a lot of the other clubs. So how much opportunity Lombard gets, and it could be a bit of a situation of like Bailey Humphries found himself in early on where he is stuck in that forward line. But as you said, the high energy does bring his tackling into play, which at least, if he's laying 4 or 5 of them, we know we can probably bank maybe 16 to 20 points before he even gets a touch, which is a good thing from a rookie point of view. And realistically, even if he is going 60s, he puts 150K on that price. And, as the season develops, that potential dual position becomes handy.
Yeah, I think his job security should be pretty good as well, which is handy. You want that with your starting picks. I know I've been stuck in the past where you start a rookie and then they get dropped early and you sort of just leaves you in shambles trying to trade them out and your size wage trading and not really getting much coin. So I think his job security could be handy. But like you said, I think when you are doing your team, he probably is that rookie that you're happy to slide out if you need to squeeze some extra cash and can get in like a 120K guy instead of for him.
Yeah, 100% there. We'll move on to Bailey Humphrey now in the forward line. Like, I'm not in love with that price, but he has the potential there to, we're talking about Flanders, the fourth banana. He could be that fifth one if they especially spread the CBAs a little bit more, or if Took spends a bit more time up the forward line. Another highly touted, very talented son. There have been games where, because of that forward role, we probably haven't seen the best, because especially if you're on the losing side, you can find yourself very much out of the play. But when he has been up around the ball. He has definitely delivered some decent scores in his first couple of years, especially in that first season when he came in as a rookie, and pretty well had that 4-week period where you couldn't get enough of Bailey Humphrey around your team. So what are your thoughts there about Bailey, mate?
Yeah, he's an interesting one for me because, like you mentioned, that first year he had games, the West Coast game, I think he dropped to 120. So he's shown that he has that scoring potential. I think I think his confidence this year was a bit shot. He was a bit of a whipping boy, so did get subbed off quite a lot. I think, this year we can see him getting those CBAs up. His CBAs were about 10% last year, so real low. So we can see in the preseason in the practice game and round 0 that he's getting that sort of maybe up towards 30, 40%. I think he could be a good pick, like more as a projection, but like there is those other guys such as like Caleb Daniels, similar price. So you would want to see something from him in preseason to sort of justify picking him with those other good options. But yeah, a watch for me, but watch and see.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, because I've said this on the other videos, some of these targets necessarily aren't for your starting teams, but players to have in mind. And we're looking at a lot of those mid prices in our forward lines. We've got Bailey Smith, McRae, Caleb Daniel, Luke Parker, Philippou. Like there's an absolute ton of them this season. But as good as they are, there's reasons why some of them are cheap. Injury prone. It depends on the role, and it's sort of okay. What do you do if they just don't work out for us? So we've got to have some other options, and Bailey Humphrey is definitely a potential there. If it doesn't work out, because he does have that early buy, if he comes out in round 0 and then round 1 again against West Coast and the role looks good, or if the Suns were to get an early injury and you needed to sort of pivot to somebody else, he does become an option there because he is at a lower price. So it's not like you've got to go reaching to find money. And then, it also depends on what sort of forward rookies. If we've got a ton of forward rookies, obviously easy to go down. But if we don't, it's just another option we can kind of have a look at if the role is right.
Yeah, for sure. Definite watch on the roll. And yeah, like you said, you do have those round 0 and then round 1 and then the buy. So yeah, if you do need to sort of flip, you can flip before he gets that price increase.
Yeah, and that'd be it. Because if he did go, say, like he did in that game, that 4-week period where I think it was scores between 99 and 100 and 120, or it might have been 116, the West Coast game. You're going to see that really low break even and that potential to make cash. So if the role was right and he came in with a break even around that 0 mark coming into his buy, well, you could potentially, even if let's just say it's McRae, 390k, and if for whatever reason he wasn't working out or he copped an injury in those first 2 rounds and you needed somebody to go down to, not only would you make the cash from the price difference of about 120k, but then you'd have somebody who on the bubble was looking very good from a cash generation purpose. So that's why he is locked in there. One that I haven't included on my list, and I'll see if there's anybody else from yours, from a draft perspective, Jared Witts. In redraft single seasons, a lot of people sometimes like to reach for rucks. There is absolutely going to be a group of rucks this year that nobody's kind of looking at because, again, they're not the sexiest pick. But he's a guy who still averaged 108 last season. He's an absolute beast in that midfield, and tapping down to one of the best midfield groups in the comp. So if you kind of want somebody that you might be able to pick up from round 12 onwards, definitely look at him instead of kind of reaching for your cherries and your Gorns and people who are going in those first couple of rounds, because he can deliver similar numbers, or if not, it might only be a 10-point difference to those top rucks, and you could get him 10, 12 rounds afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. I think we saw his scoring ability 2 seasons ago where I think he was the R1. So yeah, you do know that he can produce those high-end numbers. It's just he's getting a bit older now, sort of suffered a few more injuries last year and sort of saw a bit more emergence of Ned Moyle, which I think is an interesting one as well. He's only 22, but looks like pretty much the best ruckman in the VFL and is re-signed, so committed to the Suns. And he got given a few more games last year, and they even experimented playing Witts and Moyle, but yeah, I don't think that one worked. So I don't think they'll go back to that one. So yeah, I think Witts is an interesting one. I probably prefer other premium ruck options over him. But yeah, I think for draft, he could be an option, but I would probably handcuff that with picking Moyle as well, so you do have the cover on your bench. Because I could see times during the year where Witts, when he is a bit more battered and bruised, does get rested and they get some games into Moyle, because I think he's starting to be able to hold his own, as we saw when he was playing a bit more AFL games, and they will want to get games into him.
Yeah, that's the perfect part I was going to bring in afterwards, mate. Well said, because if you've got sort of playing in a draft league where you've got 5 or 6 on your bench, you can have a ruck sitting there who's not doing much. You can then have a loophole option if your league allows it with those VC captaincies. But yeah, you can handcuff him, and the moment which misses, you just put him on the bench, and Moyle comes in for you, and it's happy days. You still got a ruck who's scoring pretty well, and it's really in your drafts probably going to end up costing you, you pick 15, 16 in your last pick in the draft if your draft's that deep. So, it's a big deal for two guys who are going to deliver you the numbers which aren't that far off what the top people are paying.
Yeah, for sure. I think they're both guys who, if they do ruck, they will ruck 80% of the game, because you don't really have a sort of designated chop out unless Ethan Reid sort of comes on a bit more. And yeah, like I said, the experiment of playing both of them didn't work last year, so you're probably going to get one or the other. So yeah, you can do that where you're happy to handcuff yourself and just lock one of them in.
Yep, 100%. Is there anybody else on that Gold Coast Suns list you'd like to talk about?
Not particularly, I think. Lockie Weller, if we didn't acquire Rioli and Noble, would have been an interesting one. But yeah, coming off the 2 ACLs, he is only 300k. I think he has proven that he can put 150k on that price. But yeah, I think because the fact we have acquired Rioli and Noble, probably don't need his sort of rebound as much. And I think he will probably get pushed up the ground a bit, maybe to that wing. So yeah, but other than that, I think it's just probably those main heavy hitters in the midfield, with the fact that we don't rotate the midfield too much. So it is probably a bit harder to try and get more options, and sort of the only real rookie standing out at the moment is sort of Leo Lombard. A lot of those other guys, Jake Rogers is sort of similar price, but I think he'll have a sort of similar role where he's playing deep forward, sort of pressure forward, energy type player. Ethan Reid, I think he's just so raw. So you can watch him in the preseason, see how he goes, see if he's getting that backup ruck time, which could be handy. But yeah, just really raw. So see how he progresses, and then probably the same thing with Jed Bolter, just young key forward. So probably steer clear, even though he's at a pretty cheap price.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know I'm going to get questions about the human highlight reel and Mac Andrew. From a classic point of view, I'd stay away. Even from a draft point of view, I don't like. Yes, he did have that period there where he was just shredding the halfback role, and he looks fantastic. Great player to watch. But from a Supercoach point of view, I'd be staying away from. And even Bodie Uland, as much as he had that absolute stupid breakout game where he went over 150. Just the way the Suns backline set up now, I don't see either of them being that relevant.
Yeah, for sure. I think Uland's probably, you look at that backline and you do need sort of some lockdown in it, because you do have the rebounders in Noble and Rioli. So yeah, Uland will probably provide you that lockdown, and then Will Powell will probably be other small defender that can lock down as well. And then yeah, Mac Andrew, key position player who will sort of play that third tall intercepting role, but I'm not sure his accumulation's really there that he can press to be a full-time premium. And yeah, also Zimmer does love throwing him around, so he will play games forward, which will hurt his scoring.
Yeah, 100%. The only other name I kind of want to mention is Zach Evans, who's come over from, I think it was the Melbourne Renegades he might have been playing at. So he's a Category B. He's left cricket to come join the footy. So just an interesting one there, because interesting that I think he was part of also the Australian under-19 squad. So highly touted cricketer, and for him to turn his back on that to start playing footy. There must have been a reason that the Suns have seen, and also confidence in himself to have a crack at that. So not one for starting, but be interesting to track his progress and see how he goes leading it. Come sort of midway through the season.
Yeah, for sure. We've had a few sort of cricketers around our club. We had Alex Keith when he first started, and then he obviously left. Ended up at the Crows and the Dogs, but yeah, good to get one back and see how he progresses.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys are just natural sports people. And you said Alex Keith, and spent a couple of training sessions down at my cricket club, and top bloke, and it turned into a very handy footballer for both, especially the Crows at the end there. So he's going to have the athletic profile. That won't be the problem. Just how much the footy now that he can pick up in that short time. But get in such a successful VFL program as the Suns have, wouldn't be surprised if he learns and picks it up pretty quickly. And it's not a young kid compared to some of these other players. So we do see the transition from other sports, and usually it's the Gaelic guys, but obviously he's got some footy background to him. So that'll be just an interesting one. It'd be handy to have those sort of players come mid-season if they can make it, and nothing better than a downgrade option at under 100K for the first time since probably back when I think the Giants and Suns might have been coming in. We've had rookies that cheap.
Yeah, for sure.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it. It's been great talking the Gold Coast Suns.
Thanks for having me on. It's been good fun.
No problems. And continue to check us out, like, subscribe, and we'll be up with a new video for the teams in Supercoach preseason as we count down to the official opening of the Supercoach for 2025. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Bye.